And welcome to the Carnegie Clean Energy August 2025 Investor and Shareholder Webinar. My name is Anthony Shields. I'm the Chair of Carnegie Clean Energy. I'm joined here this morning with our Chief Executive, Jonathan Fieve, and together we're going to update you on our recent activities, some of the opportunities that we're pursuing, developments that we have underway around the world. Jonathan and I have recently visited the US and Europe. We can see markets emerging globally. Those locations are where the market's actually more mature. The most mature, we have teams over there, and it's been an incredibly rewarding experience visiting industrial and commercial partners, testing the market for shareholders. The performance of the share price has been encouraging over the last couple of weeks, and we're hoping to continue that. Obviously, we have a share purchase plan underway. We're very happy to talk about that later in the presentations. We'll be having a Q&A at the end of the discussion. I'm going to hand over now to Jonathan, who's going to take you through the presentation, but please add in any questions that you have during the presentation to the platform, the Investor Hub platform, and we'll answer them towards the end. So over to you, Jono.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony, and welcome all to the webinar. Look, I'd like to just talk a little bit about what we're going to cover here today. We're going to talk about really, what our purpose is, our objectives. I'm going to provide an update on, where we're at with our key project, which is the Achieve project, deploying CETO in Spain. We'll talk about some of our sort of medium-term goals and the exciting new 6 megawatt project that we've just kicked off in Spain. A bit about the market and some corporate activities also. I just wanted to start the presentation with a reminder of really who we are, just to make sure that it's clear, where we fit in the sort of ecosystem of energy. And yes, we're a technology developer. So we're all about developing intellectual property and owning that intellectual property, and that can be in the form of patents. Of course, there's a lot of know-how that doesn't find itself in patents. And equally, trade secrets are critically important. Increasingly, a lot of the IP is wrapped up in the code. For instance, in our reinforcement learning AI controllers, but also in the drawings and so forth. So that's a really important thing to remember. Also, we make money by selling, by making and then selling the CETO and more power technologies. So that's how we see our future market, as the manufacturer of those products. But more than that is we provide the services that relate to those products, and those are services for project developers and owners. So, there's, I guess, a huge financial burden, and it's very capital intensive to build projects. So, that's for others. We are the ones who will sell the equipment and then provide the services to the equipment. And I'd also point out that those services start well before a project is built. So we do get those early revenues from supporting those developments. So really, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? And I think, this is, fairly clear to everyone, I think, who's interested in energy, because it's, it's in the media day in, day out. And that is, we know we need clean energy for a stable climate. We have emerging, established renewables really in the form of solar and wind that are dominating. But the challenge is they're highly variable and inconsistent. You can see the headline on the right there that was talking to the wind droughts that were suffered on the eastern seaboard, particularly Victoria and South Australia last year, where in the middle of winter and in the shoulder season as well, we had no wind and limited solar as well. So there are challenges even as we build out large quantities of solar and wind. And the building of those technologies is becoming challenging as well, in that there is a lot of pushback. Wind generators in particular have seen communities kind of concerned about the visual amenity impacts, and even some solar developments and battery developments concerning for the community. So that's creating challenges. We know nuclear is very expensive, takes decades to build, particularly in Australia, where it's really untested technology. And of course, demand is going up rapidly. We have a lot of electrification of industrial processes. We have electric vehicles, and now more than ever, data centers are coming on board, which are driving up the demand rapidly. Of course, in Europe, more so, the geopolitical issues with importing energy has come to the fore in the last few years. So, I think the problem to solve is clear, and we know that, and the governments of the world know that too. So the EU, the UK, and the US in particular are recognising this challenge, and they are committing big dollars to solve it. And ocean energy is increasingly part of that solution. In fact, just recently, the European Commission announced that ocean energy should be at least 5% of the portfolio of European nations. So this is a new move that they've actively guided member states to take on ocean energy. They've got some targets in the EU: a gigawatt of ocean energy by 2030, 40 gigawatts by 2050. They've also got the funding that's following on from those targets. And the dollars or the euros in this case are really large. In 2023, we saw almost 200 million in funding towards ocean energy. The regional governments in Europe as well are pushing for ocean energy implementation. We're feeling that in Spain, where we've been supported, but obviously France and Portugal also have great wave conditions, and they're putting their money behind ocean energy. The US is a recent contender in the ocean energy space. It's probably in the last 5 years spent about $60 million on a test site in Oregon called PacWave, and that's a fantastic development to see that happening. It's just about to have its ribbon cut, ready for wave energy developers, and having these test sites is a huge benefit to developers like us, because it takes away all the consenting risk. All the environmental approvals are done. There's a cable to shore. They followed up that with $112 million committed to advancing wave energy technologies through funding schemes. Those schemes are a little bit caught up in the political machinations of the new administration. So it's going to be interesting to see, but those commitments have been made. In the UK, they're supporting wave energy and ocean energy more generally in a different way through what they call contracts for difference, which is its revenue support and underpins the price of or the tariff that ocean energy is being paid. And so we're seeing quite a big jump in the tidal space, and wave energy is now being added to the mix as well. So, the globe And the major sort of wave energy players are recognising the opportunity or the problem. And, you know, we feel like we've got the solution. But before we leap to that, I just wanted to, you know, touch back on why wave energy is so special, and hone in on a few particular points. And I think, you know, it's, as we've said many times, and everyone knows, it is very consistent, very predictable. The amount of energy is vast. I think if you whip around the Australian continental shelf, you'll find 10 times more wave energy than Australia consumes. So, you know, there's no question there in terms of the amount of energy available. But it's the time of that resource, when that resource is available, that's so valuable nowadays. You know, if you think about, for instance, winter in the Northern Hemisphere, you know, that's when solar's at a minimum, and, you know, heating demand is driving electricity demand. It's actually the same for Australia. You know, in winter, surprisingly, it's particularly in the East Coast, winter has the lowest average wind speeds. So, and of course the lowest solar. So again, wave energy is perfectly set up for, you know, where it's producing its maximum in the winter to fill the gaps left behind. A recent study in Ireland showed that wave energy was in fact paid, or could be paid, twice as much as the other renewables, because it's producing when wind and solar aren't. And also, just from a footprint point of view, it consumes about 5 times less area than offshore wind. So, you know, we can minimise the physical footprint as well. So yeah, moving on to our solution, and yes, I'm sure many of you are familiar with our solution. You can actually get a really great insight into it in the animation through that QR code, but just go to our website or our YouTube channel. But one of the key points, and in fact, you know, the reception we had in the US and more recently in Germany for the various roadshows that Anthony mentioned, is just you know, the benefit of being fully submerged from a visual amenity point of view is huge. So, you know, CETO will be installed a few kilometres from shore, potentially in sort of 40 metres of water or so, and you can't see it. So, you know, all these visual amenity challenges that offshore wind are facing, we avoid because we are fully submerged. It also has the benefit of making it much safer. You know, we're away from the breaking waves, you know, the highest forces in terms of storm waves and things like that. The other advantages that we have, which are unique, is we are increasingly using artificial intelligence to control our device to capture more of the wave energy available, and, you know, making sure we're I guess tuning to every single wave that comes in, and megawatt hours are critical. They're very precious. We need to capture as many as we can for the capital we've spent. We also understand that bigger is better, and, you know, when you're trying to get economies of scale, that's critical. So a 1 megawatt capacity of our CETO unit is actually leading industry.
But Jonathan, I might just make a quick comment there regarding that. In fact, this slide that you've brought up here, a lot of the interest we had, particularly in Europe and in Germany, were from very informed and, as I said, mature industry participants, whether they be manufacturers or suppliers of equipment that we're working with, or in fact investors and shareholders. They're very well informed. They were questioning us in regards to some of the things that we've listed here, but just to make the point that Jonathan was emphasising, that per square metre or per square foot, the generation capacity of our device versus our competitors, and also, if you look at the wind industry, we are superior, and that's really important in a market like Europe, where land area, or in fact seabed area, is really important. So we can generate more electrons effectively per square kilometre of area, and we can be located close to shore, and we are underwater. So all those things mean that we've got a very good reception from those participants and the people that we spoke to over there. Jonathan, I might let you talk about some of the more technical specifications in the bottom half of the chart there.
Yeah. So we've talked about it being fully submerged, which has the visual impact aspect benefit, but also being able to avoid extreme waves. And I mean, we don't treat it as a binary sense. We don't dive deep just in storms, but we can actually moderate the amount of energy coming into the device by adjusting its position in the water column. So you can see on the image there, we're diving down to 20 meters, and that's kind of a nominal maximum where we need to go in the most extremes. But we will regulate in between 20 meters and a few meters below, according to the wave height, and that's a unique feature that we have. An important thing to remember as well is in terms of installation and recovery, we're very focused on making sure that we're able to maintain these devices in the most efficient manner possible. You'll see those yellow floats there. They're actually quick connects. We can command the device to quickly to immediately disconnect, and it'll float to the surface, and we can tow it back to shore if we need to maintain it. We can swap out devices, so we can have one ready there to swap out. Our strategy is very clear, is that we don't use divers, and we don't do work offshore in terms of servicing. We simply go and collect the device, return it to port where it's most effective to do that work. The other things that you see in this table that may be worth pulling out is capacity factor. Just to explain that means between 30% and 50% of our overall capacity is what our average production is in a year, and of course that depends on the site. So and that's an important figure, and it's very competitive against. It's certainly higher than solar. And it's generally higher than wind. So that's quite important.
This chart's really important for investors potentially considering and thinking about our business model. But as Jonathan said, we are the manufacturer and developer of the technology. We want to sell the technology, we want to sell these devices, and we want to sell engineering services. A big part of the economics around our device involves project feasibility, project design, obviously the installation and the deployment of the device, but then 20 to 25 years of recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue for maintenance, for upgrades, for OPEX. All of these economics have been scrutinised in the projects that we've won, including Europewave, and obviously they'll form a really big part of the 6 megawatt project we're looking at doing at the same location in Spain. I think a really important feature, Jonathan, is that we're able to deploy and maintain these devices without using divers, and also using small vessels, and that is a big advantage of our device relative to offshore wind in particular. We're more efficient, we're quicker, and we can keep them in the water for longer. As Jonathan said, megawatt hours are what it's all about, and so we can keep those hours pumping.
Indeed. Okay, let's switch to I guess the demonstration of the technology of CETO specifically, and you will have heard about Europewave, and you will have heard us talk about Achieve. So the Achieve project is the collection of the sub projects essentially, and I'll just go through them one by one. So Europe Wave was a global competition. That was a 3-phase competition, and we're currently in phase 3. We've ticked off phase 1, phase 2, and it's important to remember that, you know, from the 36 applicants that begun this program, we'll rank number 1 at this commencement of phase 3. So, you know, we've been funded through phase 1 and 2, and now we're funded into phase 3, which is the deployment of the unit. And the reason we were ranked number 1 was really judgment on the criteria that are really critical for commercial performance, which is cost of energy, reliability, availability, and survivability. And the features that we mentioned before have been critical in allowing us to achieve that. It's a 2-year deployment at the site at BMEP, which is in Spain near Bilbao. We've formed a team there. We have more engineers in Bilbao now than we do in Australia. They're the ones driving this project. Our Chief Technology Officer is sort of running the team over there. So it's been fantastic to be able to, you know, transfer him from Australia, where he, you know, intimately understood the company and what we're doing over there. So that's been fantastic. And since we've been working under the Europe Wave program, we've subsequently been awarded 2 additional funding support packages, one from the sort of Spanish federal government and another from the Basque regional government, which is, the Basque country is that region that we're in Bilbao. So in total, 7 million euros of funding coming to us to support this program, and that's 7 million euros that, you know, shareholders didn't need to fund, because we have to deploy and demonstrate this technology, and we've been able to do it in a very lean capital way, and that's been, you know, a real I guess a credit to the team to be able to secure this kind of funding. We're running short of time. I'll quickly move on to a bit of a pictorial update of where we're at with that project. You can see there the various power takeoff equipment components that have arrived, that we're in the midst of integrating. So, you know, from left to right across the top, we have one of the generators. There's one in each power takeoff unit. There's in the middle there's the transformer. On the right, we have the gearbox. That again, there's 3 of those. Bottom left, one of our engineers preparing the electrical cabinet. In the middle, the clutch brake system, and on the bottom right, there's the battery for power smoothing and management of grid loss. So yeah, these components are coming together as we speak in Bilbao, and also at our partner manufacturers. And so yeah, there's some real tangible progress underway. You'll see here in this next set of pictures, we have in the top, we have the foundation frame, which is being fabricated at the moment in Bilbao. There's 3 of those, one for each primary mooring. And in the bottom picture there, you see the port of Bermeo, which is the nearest port to the offshore site. And right in the middle of the picture are some chains that have been prepared for the mooring system. So yeah, things are definitely underway in a big way over there in Bilbao. Quite a recent activity was preparing what they call the static cable, or the export cable. So this is the cable that runs from where the C2 unit's deployed back to the shore. And so that was pulled to the surface and checked, the measurements taken to make sure it's it's in its a good state, and the connector, you can actually see the connector in the background there, was installed onto the cable, and that's then lowered back down, ready for us to connect to. And on the left-hand side, you can see one of the wave buoys being deployed. So we've got a number of wave buoys measuring the wave conditions out there, and we'll continue to measure during the deployment. So what's next for Achieve? We are finalising the remaining design tasks. There's manufacturing underway of much of the componentry. We'll then integrate. We have defined the assembly processes. Quite a lot of that's happening with our partner SKF in Germany, where we'll also undertake the integration tests. Anthony and I were actually just at SKF only a month ago, and they're a real super high quality German manufacturer who has a dedicated ocean energy team. So it's pretty rare to find that, but SKF have really embraced this emerging technology and emerging industry. We'll then transport everything to the port for final assembly integration, and then wet test at the port. And then, of course, we deploy using the rapid process without divers as described. And finally, of course, we're operating, generating energy, putting power into the Spanish grid, and getting all the data back in terms of reliability and performance. And this is the outcome that will really drive the value in the business, because the utilities of Europe are really watching to see companies like Carnegie do this, and other companies, comparables that have done this recently have certainly had a massive uptick in their valuation. A very recent development and particularly exciting is the very beginnings of our next step in commercialization, which is megawatt scale projects. We've penned an MOU with BMEP, the owner of the site that we're deploying Achieve at, to extend that to a 6 megawatt array. The EU support is there, as I described before. It almost sort of starts at 60% capex support, and can go up quite a bit. We've seen 80% capex support, so it's a very compelling project. BMEP is supportive with the MOU, and we've started commencing discussions with project participants, and that's going to ramp up those discussions, and we're looking to secure that project in the next couple of quarters. As I say, with the likes of SKF on board supporting us on the Achieve project, and with HPE as well, we've sort of really developed that supply chain in that area, and so it'll make developing that 6 megawatt array much more clear for us, and also clear for the project owner, who we'd expect a utility or a big energy company to own this project.
Just to reinforce that point, Jonathan, the governments, the federal funding that's available in the EU, in the UK for ocean energy projects is significant. It's an immense opportunity for us. And Jonathan made the point that for the owners of the company, for our shareholders, this is, importantly, it's non-dilutive capital. It's a well-worn pathway for industries before us. Our industry is following it now, and there is significant capital available. Ultimately, we don't want to be the owner and operator of these projects. We want to sell the devices, sell the technology, and sell engineering services. So we're playing an important role here in trying to coordinate these projects. We have willing and interested parties who can come with expertise in permitting, etc., and importantly the capital. So that's it's early days for this project, but we're very, very excited about it. I know there's a couple of questions about the competitive environment, so we might talk about that in the Q&A session.
I'll just switch quickly to More Power. So you remember More Power is a spin-off technology from CETO. We've been busy with a scaled demonstrator, which we deployed at our test site here in Fremantle last year, and we completed operations, did all the numbers and wrapped up that project to the satisfaction of the Blue Economy CRC, who are the primary funders, and also the partners, who are the large aquaculture companies, because they're the launch partners essentially for our commercial scale design, which is underway. So we've secured some funding from the Blue Economy CRC to complete the preliminary design. That's underway, and we're working with the aquaculture companies in terms of the designs that will go onto their vessels. You can see in the image there one of the feed barges there that was in for servicing, and one of our staff in the foreground there for a bit of scale. They're big vessels. The beauty of More Power is that it's the buoy as such is already built. That's it in the picture, and we apply our power takeoff technology to it, and in doing so decarbonise their offshore operations, because they're currently diesel powered, and they need to move away from that for all sorts of reasons. Obviously the carbon footprint, but noise and other things. So that's a really important and also I guess complementary development for CETO. Like the learnings between the two teams, the More Power team and the CETO team, we're really seeing as they develop these different technologies, but from the same core. There are other offshore demand opportunities. We're in discussions with different groups. The defence sector, for instance, is very interested in offshore generation, because autonomous underwater vehicles, surveillance systems, those kind of things really need a lot of energy, and they need it in remote places. So watch this space. Okay, I just wanted to put a final slide here, just to reiterate, the revenue sources, the way we see the company business model emerging. And again, that's sale of the CETO More Power systems, supplying the spares and services with operations, maintenance, but also software upgrades. As with most devices these days, there's great opportunity to improve them, as the software and the algorithms develop. So we certainly see that as a key part of our business model going forward. And as the technology owner, we don't see how others could do that work. So we're in a great position there. And again, the revenues for these some of these services, particularly the project development services, occur quite a number of years ahead of the commissioning of the system. So as we work towards the 6 megawatt array, we'd expect to see the owner of that array needing our services to develop.
That's a really important point, Jonathan.
About sales of the systems, the 75% of that, the capex to build these projects is the CETO system. So, I guess the margin we apply is applied to a very large portion of the overall project capex.
I was just going to make a very quick point there, Jonathan, that there really is, we're perceiving an inflection point now in what we think is our addressable market. We're seeing projects kick off in Europe in particular, an interest in the US for ocean energy projects. And these are projects for deployment and commissioning in 2-3 years from now. Revenues for a company such as ours, with a revenue model such as ours, start, as Jonathan said, 3 to 4 years before that commissioning. So now is a really important time for us to be out winning market share, participating in projects, and demonstrating the future trajectory of the electricity we can produce from our devices.
Yeah, and as we transition now to the Q&A, I'll just throw up a little graphic of our global footprint, and as you can see, we're certainly, we're certainly active in Australia, particularly with more power. We'd love to do CEDO projects here. I see there's some questions about our kind of political drivers there, but we can see definitely a global opportunity, and we're setting up the business for that. And I talked about the government support that's coming online in the US, and of course Europe is the established leader in this space. So yeah, we're going to transition to the Q&A now. Yeah, we've got a number of questions. Some have come just now through the webinar, thank you, and also some have come from prior. So yeah, and look, if we don't address your particular question, we will certainly endeavour to do that in the near future directly. But we'll start with what is the expected maintenance schedule for the buoys? How will the power export cable survive the constant movement? And how will the operating depth be adjusted to cope with severe weather? So, okay, we'll address this in pieces. So a maintenance schedule, our design schedule is to maintain no more often than 3 years. So that's the design challenge that we've put to our engineers, and that's what we're building the device to do, and that's what we put to our suppliers as well. So yeah, I guess planned maintenance will occur no more often than every 3 years. And as we said before, that maintenance process is actually a quite straightforward process because we've designed it to be very easy to just disconnect and tow back to shore. Export cable, or what we call the dynamic cable is what's being referred to there, is the cable that comes from the buoy and goes down to the seabed. Now, these cables are not that unusual in marine energy, particularly in the oil and gas space. So there's a lot of examples of floating systems with cables that go to shore, and they tend to use what they call a lazy S or a lazy wave configuration, where the cable goes down, back up over with some flotation, and then back down and touches down on the seabed. So as the buoy goes up and down, we aren't picking up and putting down the cable; it's moving just within the water column. You'll see that in our animation, and as I say, it's not a particularly new way of doing things, so we're quite confident in that. And yeah, we spoke earlier about the operating depth and in relation to severe weather. So it's really a command that we send. The controller has some autonomy, but we can also send commands directly and tell it to move down to a new position, and it does so through the power takeoff system. We can direct it to go there.
Jonathan, it's really important to point out that system's been developed. It was our idea. We developed the idea to the point where Hewlett Packard Enterprise was interested in what we were doing, and that's where the machine learning and a lot of the software engineering has been provided by them as part of a investment of their time. So I think that area, in terms of the ability to adjust and tune the buoy in real time to extract the most amount of energy or avoid the really dangerous energy, is a really important innovation that's unique to us, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is a really important partner for us, and it's some opportunities that we're exploring with them outside of a pure wave energy project. There's other areas that and products we can develop in conjunction with them.
Yeah, and we'll see this advanced control in action in Spain, because it's part of the controller that's embedded in the unit. All right, maybe this is one for you, Anthony. Who are the competitors in the ocean energy market?
Yeah, sure. So there are a number of industry participants. We consider ourselves one of a group who are the industry leaders, and of that group, to be honest, they're the companies IDOM and Motion, who came second and third in the Europe Wave project. Their technology is less mature than ours. Smaller devices, really testing the concept, as opposed to us developing a scaled demonstrator and then a follow-on project to be at commercial scale. There is one real competitor who have done a great job, Core Power Ocean. They're a Swedish company, private. There is quite a lot of publicly available information on them. They have a device which is half submerged, half above the water. It's not the same. It's similar in kind of scale, but the dimensions are different, and their power takeoff is a different design. They, having had a commercial scale device in the water about 2 years ago, 18 months ago, they've now progressed to really significant amounts of capital invested by government and industry funding to develop bigger projects. And they've had the valuation uplift. Again, there's publicly available information you can source on Core Power. That is a trajectory we expect to follow, to be honest. As we demonstrate our device, demonstrate our technology in the ocean, it's a really important, as I said earlier, an inflection point for us. They're probably the only other real competitor in the market at this stage that's at our level of development. But that's good. We need other industry participants demonstrating that this is a real industry, help building the supply chain, help growing the government and the industry funding. So I'd say Core Power is our main competitor.
Yeah, and I think the point to reinforce there is just that with their with the fact that they're floating on the surface and we're submerged, we see a real sort of benefit to our technology in that aspect, because large farms of wave energy converters will be visible if you're breaking the surface, and will struggle, I think, with community acceptance. Okay,
Jonathan, as I said, we're admirers of them, and we know them well. Their device, as I said, is a similar scale, not the same size or shape, but similar scale. Their device is 300 kilowatts. Ours at scale is 1 megawatt. Based on our mathematics, our spatial density, i.e. number of megawatt hours we can produce per square meter or per square kilometre, is superior to theirs. So, we think we compare incredibly well. If you add that to our ability to stay below the surface and avoid large dangerous swells, I think we compare very well.
Yeah. Okay, next question. The question is, do you manage the energy system, and what about energy as a service, meaning the customer only buys the energy as delivered? Look, I think that model works well, but it's not our business. I think the utilities and the energy companies of the world, and there are some really big players, especially in Europe. That's what they do on a day-to-day basis. So we want to stick to our knitting, which is really producing this or developing the technology and selling the equipment, because from our perspective, that's a lot less capital intensive and more suited to our business. And that's really the path that we intend to take. Maybe a question for Anthony there. What would the project funding economics look like for the 6 megawatt project and other early array projects?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, in terms of the funding, I assume that's the size of the funding required and maybe the sources. Two really, really important questions. It's still very early days for us on that project. We know what our devices cost. We know what they cost at scale. We know what it costs to do the feasibilities and design these projects. We know where we fit into that ecosystem. We know what we think we can charge, and we know what sort of margin we can earn on that. And then there's a modelling process once the devices are deployed and the project's operational, in terms of a annual recurring revenue from that maintenance. I think it would be too early for me to give actual numbers. We've provided information in our presentation around how the economics work, about the capex of these sorts of projects, and how much of that is attributable to CETO and therefore revenue to us. No, I think I can refer you to that, but it would be too early for me to talk about the actual size of that project at this stage.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Jonathan, one other question I'll make there. The funding is going to come from a combination of government funding, and there's some very large programs in the UK and in Europe, and as we mentioned in the US. But we are already seeing significant private or publicly traded private companies getting involved in industry, OEMs, construction and development companies, software companies, etc. So there's no shortage of funding that's becoming increasingly available to the industry. So we'll be looking to tap into that ecosystem also.
Yeah. Had one question or comment here. Love the design. How are corrosion issues dealt with? So that's a common question. Of course, being in a salty ocean is challenging for certainly metallic parts. Having said that, though, it's been a challenge that's been around for a long time. Maritime and oil and gas in particular have dealt with this. So the way we deal with it is certainly for the steel buoy construction, which is obviously the biggest component. We use cathodic protection, which is very established and works incredibly well to minimise the corrosion. And these kind of structures can last many decades with that protection. I would say that we are looking at other material technologies. We have some funding through a European consortium to develop a concrete-based buoy material, which is pretty interesting. It sounds weird to have concrete as a kind of a structure for a buoyant vessel, but it's not as unusual as you might think. There are boats out there made of concrete, but there's also many oil and gas structures that have been in the water for 50, 60 years that are made of concrete. So, and that's one of the beauties of our devices, particularly the hull, which never comes out of the water, I should add. Part of our maintenance philosophy is the big structure, the buoy, stays in the water the whole project life, and we simply crane in the power takeoff modules from the top. as they're refurbished or need servicing. That's a very deliberate strategy that we've had. So yeah, if you make something, the hull out of something like concrete, which is obviously heavy, it doesn't really matter that much, because you're never having to lift it in and out of the water, apart from once in and I guess once out. Okay. Yeah, so we've had a
question. There's a question there about, is there a continuous income stream from the unit once commissioned and delivered, that is besides spares and maintenance? So it's a great question, and it's important for us because we're considering what does our business model actually look like once we've proved the technology, we've had a device in the water, which, as we said, will be in the near, in the medium term with EuropeWave. The answer is yes. The continuous or recurring revenue stream is about spare parts and maintenance, but it's also about technology upgrades, and other innovations that we can provide. It's expansion to projects, etc. So there is a long tail on the contracted revenue that we get once we're participants in a project.
We have a question here that's, how does the cost of energy production compare to wind and solar? So yeah, that's a typical question and a good one. What we do is we project out as we scale up. We project out, and we see as we start building bigger and bigger projects and more of them, the costs come down, and the costs come down using what they call the learning rate, which is the rate of reduction in cost for every doubling of capacity deployed. And what we see when we do that analysis, actually we didn't do the analysis as such. EuropeWave, through the EuropeWave program, they demanded that a third party do that analysis. So we went to a third party, gave them the input data, and then they did the work. And it showed that we're crossing over with offshore wind once we've got around 1 gigawatt deployed, 1,000 megawatts. But as I said before, that crossover, that's in cost of energy, but bearing in mind that when we're producing, often offshore wind isn't. So we can get paid up to double, according to the research. So yeah, there's the economic kind of drivers kick in well before cost parity with offshore wind, onshore wind and solar. Okay, we have we're quite a bit over time here, but we'll just keep going for a couple more. I guess we've got one here that's, well, why hasn't the Australian federal government recognised and acknowledged the potential of CETO? Wave doesn't appear to be on their agenda. And look, we certainly share the frustrations there. I guess the genesis of the current attitude was, well, we had the Liberal government who were very much, the Liberal federal government, which were very much putting a lid on renewable development. We then, I guess, we then had the Labor government come in, and there was the sort of hydrogen bubble that was occurring at the same time, and they were being directed towards hydrogen by very influential people. The current situation is they've been really, I guess, sticking to the easy stuff, which is the established wind, solar, and some battery work. Now, our argument is that Australia continues to buy equipment products from overseas because we don't support the emerging technologies. And yeah, it's a huge sovereign kind of risk and also opportunity in the case of wave energy for the government to really step up, support an industry where you've got world leaders here in country and we've got the best wave energy resource globally. And we've got problems like wind droughts in South Australia and Victoria at certain times of the year. So, we're trying to turn that around. That discussion is happening. The Blue Economy CRC, which we're a part of, supported a wave energy report last year, which has gone to government and is making a difference, I think, in changing the sentiment. But yeah, it's a hard road, and we have had to go to the EU, we've had to go to the US because we can't get the support here yet, and we can't ignore 60-80% support for projects that are being offered in Europe in particular. So we've had to go there for now, but no, it's a work in progress, and certainly share your frustrations.
So Jonathan, we might need to wrap up there unless you had another question you wanted to answer.
I think maybe just one last one. There was a question about the opportunities of co-location of CETO and other renewable sources, and we'll make that a last one. So yeah, there is a huge opportunity really in co-location. It may not be quite the same. Certainly co-location is a great opportunity. Integration is maybe a step too far. So when I say integration, people have talked about having offshore wind towers with wave energy devices kind of hanging off them. Our view is that is a bit too far at this current stage. But sharing infrastructure is a huge opportunity. The installation of the cables that run from the shore to offshore, the grid connection, the permitting and approval process, the community consultation, all that stuff is common to offshore wind and to wave energy. So you could certainly avoid duplication of all that cost if we co-locate. Not all sites are suitable for both, but there's plenty. I mean, picking a site that I know a little bit about is off Portland in Victoria, where an offshore wind site has been proposed, and Alinta is the developer there, and that's got one of the best wave energy regimes in Australia. So there would be a huge benefit to sharing that infrastructure and sharing all the survey costs and all the other things I mentioned. So yes, there is a good opportunity there, and yeah, we are thinking about it, and in many ways the site at BMEP is already doing that in a sense, because we're in berth 2, and in berth 3 you have Cytex floating offshore wind turbines. So yeah, definitely aware of that co-location opportunity, and yeah, trying to pursue those benefits wherever we can.
Well, thanks, Jonathan, and thanks everyone for attending. As I said, we'll get to as many of the other questions as we can via email or directly. We hope you found this morning informative, and we wanted to give you an update directly on our recent activities. I hope you consider the share purchase plan. Any queries around that specifically, please contact us. And yeah, thank you for your continued support.
Thanks, everyone.